the future of politics, and I could be wrong again, and I'm happy for you to correct me, is about politicians that are honest and that are not institutionalized in the sense that they've played the politician game all their life and they've figured out how to play that system to their advantage and nobody else's. And I think those days are numbered. Even the politicians that are beating each other up and standing in opposition going, nah, look at what he's doing. He's not doing the right thing. No, look at what he's doing, and trying to write policies to override each other. Those days are number two, because people are starting to see through that. It's like, you're coming to power. You need to help the people. You need to be forming policies that help the majority, not just yourself. And well, I'm thinking people more than ever are ready to take a stand against that. I know we've seen contrary on the Queensland elections. So talk me through that.
Yeah, well, once again, I mean, I love your enthusiastic and positive view of what's going to happen in politics.
Yes.
And I mean, there have been glimpses in Australia over the last 50 years. I think of Don Chipp and the Democrats, Bob Brown when he started the Greens, even Nick Xenophon in South Australia. You know, they were politicians who really worked from a position of truth. They had passion and they drew people to them. The problem, as always, is that when the founder leaves, what's left deteriorates, and that's happened in all of those cases.
Sure.
Now, with COVID, one thing we've learned in the Queensland election, but also, for example, in Victoria, where I live, which has been hit harder than any other state, it's been hit harder because of the incompetence of the state government here. Yet when you look at opinion polls, people in Victoria, a significant majority of them, actually think that the Premier here has done a wonderful job. And particularly now that we're coming out of lockdown, they don't remember a few months ago the suffering that so many people were going through, and many, many still are. They don't remember the mistakes that were made with things like letting people in without checking them from overseas, mucking up the quarantine, mucking up the personal protective equipment, mucking up the contact tracing. There were so many, there was a litany of failures which led us to this lockdown. And even the lockdown itself, and this is not just the Premier of Victoria's fault, because every Premier and the Prime Minister were on the same page in terms of lockdowns. This is what the Health Australia Party position paper, the way out, we call it, is trying to show people. There is a way out where we can manage all these things without needing lockdowns, without needing to wear masks all the time. You know, there's the times and places every now and again for all of these restrictive measures for a very brief, limited and a very, very targeted point of time, but not the way it's being done. So, you know, I really do wonder about the future of politics in Australia. We are, because of changes in legislation over the last decade, really, we are losing the opportunity to elect minor parties. It's getting harder and harder to elect minor parties. And it's the minor parties who give that diversity, who can bring passion and new ideas in. To be honest with you, most politicians in the major parties, the Greens as well as the Liberals, Nationals and the Labor Party, their main priority is to stay in power. They will dumb themselves down if they have to. And we've seen this time and again. Every now and again, someone pops up who's a bit different, you know, Bob Katter, for example, and then he went and formed his own party. And there's always examples of the individuals. But my great concern is that the future of the minor parties, where sometimes you have people like, say, Jackie Lambie in Tassie, who's got her level of truth. You may not agree with her, by the way. She could be right or she could be wrong, but she really passionately believes in what she stands for, and good on her. And she's been elected because of that, but there's not many of her around.
Yeah, and I think this is where Health Australia Party can play a big role. I know that in WA, I've seen that the representatives here doing a lot for education of the community to try and present solutions and options and hope for people, especially people that were like basically feeling like they're going out of their mind and they don't want to attribute to the mental health statistics, which you rightfully mentioned earlier. I want to talk about, I've recently been doing a lot of studies and interviewing people that have taken politics as a passion of theirs. And I do see the role that minority parties contribute in the forming of balance in Parliament House and going through policy and laws. And so I totally agree with you there. And if that's at risk, then the whole system is at risk, because that was contributing that fair balance to policies. Why is this coming in? What's it, what's the justification for it? And adding some fairness, if you like, in why rules or policies are being created, and who's it going to serve. And the risk that we run if we don't have that with a government that just keeps running their own policies is they could make themselves protected against being accountable for some of the wrong choices that they make.
And that's happened.
And that's a fear, because even in corporations, we see that they are still held accountable. If they make the wrong decision and logistically speaking or product speaking has an impact on people, they still have to, be held accountable. And we need to stop that bus before it's out of control for the government side of things and politics side of things.
Yeah, but it still needs truth. So, for example, in Victoria recently, one of the independents brought forward a motion calling on the Parliament to look at the potential value of natural medicine.
Yep.
And nothing radical. Wasn't talking against anything in orthodox medicine, in pharmaceutical medicine, but yet it was defeated. Now, the Liberal National Party supported it, Labor didn't, but it only got through, it got knocked down only because a number of other independents or minor party politicians who probably had done a deal voted it down. There was no other reason to vote it down. And I still now cannot understand why the Labor Party voted it down, because you see natural therapies, and I'm not talking about, fly-by-night things. I'm talking about things which are used around the world, which are endorsed by the United Nations, which are used in hundreds of millions of people by people with orthodox medical training as well as people with specific modality training. So mainstream natural medicine, what can it do? It can lower the cost of health in our whole community. It can improve the quality of life in our whole community. The only people that stand to lose are the pharmaceutical drug cartels. Now, why are political parties standing by and supporting the pharmaceutical drug cartels against the society being better off as a whole? There's so many things. And, one thing I really dislike, Bass, is conspiracy theories. So I'm not going to indulge in one.
Sure.
But to be honest with you, it just makes you wonder the hold that these massive international corporations have. And it's all been demonstrated as being a fact by Harvard University, a study they did there, which was published in 2013 after 5 years of work. They went through with experts in various fields and identified how the drug companies are manipulating the health systems of many, many countries. And this has been the problem with our COVID response. Well, it's the refusal to allow people to know about what's happening in other countries overseas in terms of treatment and prevention.
Until such time, I know we've spoken about truth, until such times where so-called donations are being transparent, where corporates or pharmaceuticals donations to politics and to politicians are exposed and shown for what they are, that's, I think, when we start to see a correlation or a link of this, of why this is currently happening. And one of the things that I love about Health Australia Party is it will not accept a donation from a corporation unless it's from an individual who's honest and transparent, like you and me, a human being that is making a contribution. Health Australia Party won't accept it. Am I correct with that?
Well, in general, you are. Yeah, because I can't imagine any corporations who, if for want of a better word, are completely ethical and transparent themselves, who would even consider giving us a donation.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm quite sure that most of them would probably donate to see the end of us, to
Right.
be honest. But
Right.
look, if there was, I'm trying to think of one actually off the top of my head. I actually can't think of a very large corporation that we would accept a donation from, but I will never say never, Bass, because life tells me that as soon as you say never, something will come along and ruin that statement. But I can't think of a large corporation that we would be able to accept a donation from. But,
Sure, but
yeah.
I guess even the endorsement, if there was a corporation that came forward and said, here's transparency, here's what I'm prepared to contribute, we would want to check why they're doing that. What's their intention behind that? Is that because they want to take control, or is it because if we get a seat in Parliament, they want to have some strings attached where they
Yeah,
can
no,
ask
no,
us to
no.
change
You
policy?
can't accept anything like that. And you
Exactly.
couldn't accept that from an individual, not just a corporation. If an
Right.
individual came along and offered us $1 million, we'd say, thank you very much. Now let's have a chat. And if after the chat everything was fine and above board and there were no strings attached, we'd welcome it greatly if
Yeah.
anyone's out there listening with $1 million to spare.
I'm sure
But
there's a few
we would
people
have to
rubbing
have
their
that chat.
looking for honest politicians. And I think that's where I'm leading to here is this is the way of the future that I'm seeing. And you've already formed that future for me is you're an honest politician. You're a person that's a co-founder of a political party that is federal, that is playing a role, small or big. At this stage, it may be small, but in the future, who knows where it's going. And the basis of your party is honesty. The other basis is most of the people involved in your party are not political motivated people. They're not people that have done careers and been institutionalized in politics. And so they are actually leaders that have stood up and said, you know what, something needs to change. And if it's going to take me, who doesn't know anything about politics, to make that change, I'm willing to get involved. And that's what we need more of.
The only thing you said wrong there, Bass, was that I'm not a politician.
Okay, well, talk to me about that.
Well, I've never been elected to Parliament for a start, but no, I mean, I'm not a political animal. It's not something that I've followed closely.
Sure.
I've been a swinging voter all my life. The
Yes.
first time I voted was to vote Gough Whitlam in, and then not long after that, I was voting him out, and I've been like that my whole life. You know, it hasn't been a matter of Labor or Liberal.